recorded, so that will be available later on for people to view it, inshallah. So whatever you say will be recorded, so be careful. So now I'd like to hand over to Mr. Muhammad Gneet. He will welcome you, and he has a presentation. Mr. Muhammad, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Dr. Ashraf. Is my slides showing through the screen?
Yes, they are.
It's very clear, yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
So thank you, Dr. Ashraf, and good afternoon, everyone. It's my honor to be here with you today in this webinar. So this is Muhammad Junaid. I'm the head of corporate governance in SCA, and I'm working within the same field in SCA since the last more than 14 years.
We all know you very well.
Thank you so much. Thank you. So
This means that you are a star, Mr. Muhammad. Huh? You are a star here.
We're learning from each other. I saw a lot of the attendees are from the listed companies, so really I'm happy to be with you today. I remember implementing corporate governance wasn't an easy pathway with us when we started.
Can you please mute your microphones? Everyone, please, can you mute your microphones, please? Thank you.
So a lot of board of directors and representatives from companies were calling us, arguing with us, and as I think there is a mic poll. So a lot of board of directors and representatives from listed companies were calling us, arguing with us, and asking us questions. Is it mandatory to implement the corporate governance? And they feel that it's difficult to implement it, implement the rules and the regulation. And our answer to them when they were asking these questions is implementing corporate governance will make your company much more stronger, and will let you understand and the responsibilities and the duties of each member and employee in the company. So implementing corporate governance is not just a task or a regulation issued by a regulator or by the financial market. We need to believe in implementing it through the listed company. And even non-listed companies, they can start from now, no harm to implement it. These rules and regulation, we're updating it as per the best practices. And as I can see through the attendees, a lot of representatives from even non-listed companies that are attending this webinar. So they can even benefit from whatever has been implemented from the listed companies and from the rules and regulations issued by SCA. And even if they have any questions, anything that they need to learn from us, we're more than happy to educate them. A lot of companies, they're paying for these sessions or these knowledge. And these information are available through the websites. You can go through the corporate governance report. You can go through the details, which is through the websites. You need to think about the shareholders, or to create something from now that even your stakeholders, let's say, for example, they need to know about more information about the company. You need to disclose about the non-financial information. Start it from now. No need to wait to be listed to disclose about these details. Even the financials, no harm to disclose about it if you feel that in the future you may list your company. All of these details are really important to, let's say, upgrade your company. So we started the corporate governance in 2007. It was optional for the listed companies. And later on, through 2009 and 2010, it was mandatory for all listed companies. And we're speaking about listed companies, we're speaking about the local listed companies. And by 2020, even the banks are now implementing the corporate governance. And there's two regulations. There is a regulation issued by SCA and regulation issued by the Central Bank of UAE. And if there is any conflict between both regulation, they will be following the rules which is issued by central bank. If you will go through the corporate governance guide, as you can see, it includes 9 chapters. All of the chapters are related to the board of directors and related to the company. So if we started from the beginning, we started with the introduction. The introduction covers the definition, let's say, for the company, the board member definition, SCA's definition, independent, non-independent, related party transaction. And all of these details are available through the introduction of, as per the chapter 1. We're speaking of, if we'll go to chapter 2, it's about the board of directors. The first, let's say, it covers the independent board of director and non-independent board of director, executive, the rules of the chairman, rule of the vice chairman. What do they need to do? For example, the invitations of the board of directors for the board of directors meeting. Who will be sending the invitation? It should be by the chairman, or the chairman can give the instructions to the board secretary and he can send the invitation. So all of these details are available through chapter 2. If we're going through chapter 3, it covers the conflict of interest in the management. So if there is any conflict, they should report it to the board of directors, or they should report it to the board, to the General Assembly. So all of these details are available through chapter 3. If we're going to chapter 4, and since if most of you they know me, I'm also attending the General Assembly. So we put all the regulation related to the General Assembly through chapter number 4, such as if you want to add an item through the invitation of the General Assembly, if you who can add the percentage of adding it. Let's say if the General Assembly invitation has been published within the first 5 days of the invitation, 5% of the shareholder representative can add an item, and before starting the General Assembly, on the day of General Assembly, 10% of the shareholders can add an item to the agenda. Also, we have some restriction of adding an item through in the General Assembly, such as any special resolution can be added through the General Assembly, or if the board of directors, one of the shareholders are thinking to, let's say, change something in the article of association, they can't change it. They can't change it on the day of the General Assembly. They need to take previous approvals. In chapter number 5, we're speaking about the rights of the shareholders and the stakeholders. What do they need to know? The IR, investor relation, the page of the investor relation through the company. All of these details are through the chapter number 5. If we're going to chapter number 6, we're speaking about the audit committee, which is mandatory, and the remuneration committee. These committees, for example, they need to be, the members should be from the board of directors. All of them should be non-executives, and at least 1/3 should be independent. Also, there is some optional committees, such as the technology company. And now, as you know, that a lot of cases is happening through the cyber securities and something related to the IT. So, and what improvements happening through the market. So we suggested the company to have a committee as a technology company. This is an optional, but it's better to create a technology company. And in chapter 7, it covers, let's say, the risk management, compliance, and audit. So the internal auditor should be, let's say, for example, reporting to the board of directors directly. He can't be reporting to the CEO. This will create a conflict of interest if he's reporting to the CEO. Think about it, that if he wants to raise something that he finds through the company, if he's reporting to the CEO, he may not be able to report whatever he wants. So this is an important thing through the audit committee. Also, the chapter number 9, it covers the corporate governance disclosure. Especially, it covers the integrated report, which covers the board of directors report, the financial statement.
I'm trying to get in to this meeting. I'm not sure whether.
Yes, you are in the meeting, but please mute your microphone. And everyone, please keep muted so that you don't disturb the speaker and the other participants, please. Thank you. Go ahead, Mohammed.
So the integrated report covers the board of directors report, the financial statements such as the audit report and the financial information and the corporate governance report, beside the sustainability report. If we're going specifically to the corporate governance report, this reflects the board of directors mainly. Since the board, the board are the chairman is signing the corporate governance report, the audit committee chair, and the remuneration chair. All of them, they're signing the report, and it covers a lot of information, and it will reflect the performance of the board of directors, such as how many meetings did they attend, is there any related party transaction, who's the member in the audit committee, how many meetings did the audit committee held in the year, and even the board of directors, the auditor, how many years he's in the company. What is the experience of the board of directors? Since the financial statement, as I mentioned before, it covers the financial part, but the corporate governance report covers the non-financial part. And in the chapter 9, it covers the general provision, which is a general information, what will be the fines on if they didn't implement the corporate governance, and the corporate governance for the implementation for the subsidiaries. It's a general article, so you can find it through the chapter number 9. I'll give you some obligations of the board members that we feel that it should be, let's say, taken to action. So maintaining the interests of the company, this is one of the obligation that the board members should think about it. The action in good faith, honesty, and seriously. So they need to be serious within the company. They need to give it the time. They give it the effort. And they believe whatever decision should be taken for the interest of the company. Also, the performance and due diligence toward the company, they need also to make sure that there is no conflict of interest. They need to understand the transaction that is happening through the company. Also, understand the role and responsibilities of the board of directors, not just being a board of directors. It's also you have some responsibilities. You need to attend the meeting. You need to participate in the meeting. Share your experience. Give them the right time. Give them your experience in the other field. If there is any research you needed, maybe you can try to do the research and give them the information. All of these responsibilities, they need to understand it. It's not only being a board member, it's there is a responsibility. Also, there is some obligations on, let's say, if something goes wrong in the company, also the board will be responsible. So you should think about it, that there is a responsibility on the board. It's not just I'm a board and that's it. No, you should think that you have a responsibility, and maybe if something goes wrong, it will be under your responsibility also. Besides that, you need to understand the corporate governance policy and ethics rules of the company, which is issued by the regulator as SCA, and what has been approved by the board of directors through the company. And all of these details should be also mentioned through the manuals internally. So how to be an effective board member? I'll go through it briefly. Understand the responsibilities and the duties of the board member as per the law and regulation. Exercise the oversight and supervisory role to verify the achievement of the executive member. Responsibility for performing the goals represented in creating the sustainable value to the shareholder, representing for the company's work, taking the necessary procedure to ensure effective internal auditing of the working flow in the company. So the strength of the board is, in our opinion, that the board, if there is a diversity and the experience of the board, this will give the board a strength, such as if there is board members who have an experience in different fields, in audit, in remuneration, in the same company's, let's say, performance, and what do the company do experience. All of these experience, if it has been available on the board of directors, this will give a boost for the company, will make the company much more stronger. Also, the leadership should have a quality leadership. It's not just a board member. They should give the company their time. A lot of board members, they have a lot of responsibility through the government responsibility or their private companies. Besides, they have a lot of memberships in different listed companies and non-listed companies. So if they're really busy, maybe they won't give the time for the company as it's expected. So maybe they should also consider giving the company much more time as per their experience. Also, they should be open-minded to the changes in the market. Let's say an example within the cybersecurity. This is, a very important topic now in the market. The sustainability, it's important, since also UAE is hosting COP28 in the next November. They should think about it and what will be important for the country and for the company. So they should be open-minded to whatever changes is required from their side. Weaknesses is opposite what has been mentioned. Like the lack of diversity, if they have the same experience, all of the board members, there is no use of being all of them at the same field. Also, lack of experts. So if they don't have the excellent experience, they may use an expert guy from outside the company, which may cost the company much more money. Also, poor strategic performance, lack of time to follow up with the company's board task, not being devoted to follow up with the work of the board of directors. So I thought that we need also to give you some examples and for the misconduct of the board of directors. So if a non-executive board member perform the function of the CEO in the event that he's absent, so this scenario will affect the board member, and his designation will be changed from non-executive to executive. So this is one example, and I think most of the attendees, they need to hear these examples. Another example of the misconduct is the independent board member perform in the function of the CEO in the event of in his absence. So the independent board member designation, it will be changed from independent to non-executive, not even to executive board member. So not even non-executive. So it'll be executive since he's doing some executive work, or he's working in the company now. Also, the chair of the board of directors, if he's performing in the duties of the management of the company, also this is not allowed, since the chairman should be non-executive in the company. Beside that, it's I need to highlight it really in this session webinar. The related party transaction. A lot of listed companies and board of directors, they do not report the related party transaction in a proper way. So they should think about it. If the transaction it is above 5%, it should be the board member should directly let the board of directors know about the transaction, and it should be approved by the General Assembly. And if it was below the 5% of the capital of the company, it should be approved by the board of directors. But these details, also some of the companies, maybe they take the approval, but they don't mention it through the corporate governance report. These details should be, the cycle should be, let's say, completed. So the board of director responsibility to be announcing it to the board of directors, and he should know what it means by a related party transaction. And also the shareholders should know about these transactions through the corporate governance report or through the General Assembly. So I have a lot of details and I have a lot of things to share it, but unfortunately, since the session is just for 1 hour, and I want to also to give you more time for Q&A if you have it at the end of the session and after Dr. Ashraf's session. So if you have any other inquiries or questions, this is my email. You can share your inquiries and questions directly to my email, and I'll be happy to support you. So thank you so much, and the mic is with Dr. Ashraf now. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Muhammad, for this very comprehensive presentation. Just quickly, because we had actually one question from the audience, which is on the liability of independent directors in the UAE and whether it's different from, say, Saudi Arabia, and whether liability of independent director is different from non-executive director or any other board member. Is it the same liability or is different, and what is the status, please?
Of course, there is different liabilities for each type of member. We can go through the codes of the corporate governance, and we can take we can have your email and we can share it with you. Share with you all the responsibilities of the executive, non-executive. Since it's a long list, I can't go through it all through this session only.
Okay, that sounds good.
So maybe Dr. Ashraf, if someone can have the email and we can share it with him after the session, inshallah.
Okay. Thank you so much. It's very hard to talk after you actually, because mashallah, it was a very comprehensive presentation. I hope that you can see my screen. Can you see my screen, Muhammad?
Yes, it's clear, Doctor.
Okay. Now, what I will do here is very briefly, I will try to tell you the lessons that we have learned as Hawkama, because Mr. Muhammad Junaid, of course, was talking about listed companies in the UAE. Now, in Hawkama, what we do is we do work with boards of directors in the region, not just in the UAE. So we work with boards in Saudi Arabia, Oman, Bahrain, and even outside, like in Egypt and Africa and Asia and so on. So we will share with you the lessons that we have seen. Just I wanted to let you know, because some people don't know about Hawkama. We are actually a corporate governance institute based in the Dubai International Financial Center in the DIFC. And we were established by the UAE government, along with the IFC, the World Bank, and the OECD as well, to create a hub for good governance in the MENA region, North Africa. So this is really the key feature of Hawkama. And we do many awareness raising sessions such as this one, for example, and we are very proud that SCA is really joining us in trying to create this awareness among companies, not just in the UAE, but also in the entire region. We work also in the policy development for codes of corporate governance, and we work with different regulators in the region in this area. And of course, we do work with the companies and banks and government entities directly for different services. And then, of course, we do train directors and company secretaries and so on. Let me just take you to the basics, because this is really the foundation for all what we are talking about today, which is what is corporate governance. Again, I know that all of you maybe know this, but one of the key definitions we always use in Hawkama is the definition by Sir Adrian Cadbury of 1992, where he said corporate governance is the system by which companies are directed and controlled. Now, why we are saying this? Because as part of good governance, if you'd like to have good governance, you have to have the two elements, the direction and the control element. And you can see below the SCA definition, which is much more detailed one. It goes in the same direction of the role of the board of directors, the role of the management, the role of shareholders, maximization of value for the different stakeholders, and so on. Now, again, if you look at the board of directors and the role expected from the board, you really have two key elements. One of them, you talk about the foresight and strategy, which is the future of the company itself. So part of that is, for example, the ethical standards of the company, the vision of the company, the mission. How are we different from other companies? How do we stand out? Where we would like to be in the coming 5 or 10 years. How do we do that? What are the key challenges we are facing? What are the resources we need? All this is about the future, which is, again, it's a key function of the board. And then the second half, which is sort of about the past, which is the controls and accountability. That's making sure that we do have the right control system in place, the right documents in place, the right frameworks, people who are working in this function, and then, of course, holding people accountable, starting from the board itself, which is accountable to the shareholders, and the company accountant to the regulators, and the management accountant to the board of directors. So this is really a key element of good governance. Now, why do we remind boards of this all the time? It's simply because if you look at what the board is doing, it has to be covering all these 4 elements. So the board has to be in the foresight of the company, the board has to be in charge of the strategy, and then they have to be overseeing the control and accountability in the company itself. And these are the 4 elements. So if you are in any board of directors interacting with them, look at your agenda, look at what you are discussing, and see whether you are actually doing all these things or only certain parts of that. Okay. So
please go into presentation mode. If you could please go into presentation mode.
This.
دكتور just يعني إذا بتحطه بس في البرزنتيشن تحت بس النقطة اللي تحت بس نتخلي بس برزنتيشن بسلايدات كلها بسيطة.
I'm trying to, okay, let me.
You can just press F5.
Okay, F5 pressed. No, it doesn't do anything. Right. Let me share again the screen so that, and then I will not change anything. Make sure that we are. Sorry for this technical issue. Do you see it now? Is it okay now?
I think if you just click the wine glass sign at the bottom, you know.
The what?
Next plus sign.
The bottom
There's
one,
the
the one that looks
presentation
like
mode.
screen.
Well, but actually now
I don't think
Dr.
it's really
Ashraf,
needed.
if you
It's
go
only pure
to
permission
volume
to take
control at the bottom, just you can see a glass kind of a sign. You press that, it will become automatically the full screen. Just next to that control, volume control at the bottom, right at the bottom of. If you see the right at the bottom of your presentation, you can see the volume control, right? Currently it is showing 80%. To the left, you can see a glass like a symbol. You just press that, it will become full.
That one beside minus.
Doctor,
this one?
it's fine.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes, sir.
That's the one. Thank you very much.
Exactly.
Sorry, thank you for your help, guys. Okay. So again, what we do is we engage with boards a lot, and we do lots of board evaluations, which we have done like maybe around 25 in the last few months, a board evaluation. So, and these are different types of companies. Some of them are listed companies, some of them are non-listed companies. So what we look at is really 4 areas which sort of cover the key functions of the board, like the basic ingredients, as Mr. Muhammad was talking about, you know, who are on the board, the committees of the board, and so on. And then strategy, risk, and dynamics and information on the board of directors. So we found out that there are many strengths that we can really recognize in the boards of the GCC countries. Now, most of them really have highly skilled directors, which is many of the board members, they are very skilled, they have massive experiences, they have diversified knowledge, they come from different backgrounds, which are very relevant for boards on which they are sitting. Of course, we are not saying all of them, but I would say maybe 60% of the board members usually are of experiences and knowledge which are relevant to the companies in which they are serving as board members. Second thing is we found that a lot of boards we deal with are really highly committed, and they are open to learn and improve. And we can see this in interviews, for example, when we meet with them, they are open to criticize themselves. Because remember that when you do some sort of board sessions and board evaluations, it is about the board coming up, criticizing themselves and opening up about what is the experience they are having as board members. So in many cases, we find that they are very committed, they are willing to improve the performance, and they are open about their own sort of deficiencies or challenges, and they say that. They say, we don't do this enough, we don't have experience in this, we are not covering that. So they are really willing to improve their performance. And what we found out is also that most of the boards we interact with, they have very good board secretaries. And this is a key function. And I think one of the elements which played a role in this is the mandate that came out by the DFM, Dubai Financial Markets, like 4 or 5 years ago, which mandated that company secretaries must be certified. So they have to be professionally trained, and they have to have exams for this. So I think it's something where we advise other regulators and other markets to follow, which is mandating the qualification of board secretaries so that they are qualified. So what we found out is many of them, or most of them, are qualified and are fit for the jobs. And then chairmanship is something where we realize that it's a strength in most of the boards, that chairmanship is very good and is doing a good job as a chairman. And then the trust and openness, which simply says that when we interview board members, they always say that we have no issues or challenges of expressing our opinions, disagreeing with the rest of the boards, or even with the chairman. We have no problems in doing this. So again, this tells you that they are, there is no sort of limitations on the ideas you can say as a board member in most of the cases that we have seen in Hawkama. However, we have also witnessed many weaknesses, and again, all these are based on the responses by board members themselves, but also on interviews when we had with them, and of course on training courses we do for the boards and sessions we do with the boards. Number one, we found that many of the boards are very small in size. So sometimes, even in one of the cases, the board was only like 4 people or 5 people and so on. And this creates a challenge in the area of diversity. Now, as you know, of course, if you are a listed company or a big company or even a big family business which has different activities, you need people in the board who have different experiences and knowledge. If you have the board only 4 or 5 people, even sometimes 7 people is not big enough for some companies. This means that the board cannot have enough skills and knowledge which is needed for that specific board of directors. What we also see because of that is the overlapping committee membership. So you see sometimes the same members in the audit committee are the same risk committee, are the same in remuneration committee, because the board is only 5 people anyways. And the chairman, of course, cannot be a member of any committees. So what you are left with is only 4 people who can be members of committees. So if the board has 3 committees, you cannot really get some people to do that. So what happens is you have the same people in these committees. And that's not a good practice, because the whole idea of the committees, as you know, is specialized discussions by those who have experience in that specific field. And you cannot really say that all the board members have experience in all the fields so they can be in all the committees. So that's honestly a waste of time for them. So this is something where we have seen a lot. Now, one of the practices which we see, and it's good practice, is sometimes you have one member of the audit committee, he or she is a member of the risk committee as well. And that creates the link between the two of them. So that's okay. But having all the members here and there, that's really something which is not a good practice. We also realize that there is a practice which is common in the region. It's not a common practice outside, which is having committee members who are not even board members. So, and we see this even in audit committee or risk committee, where you have like 2 of the members, they are not even board members. And this is a very serious issue because, for many reasons. Number one, these committee members who are not board members don't have access to all the information the board has access to. And then you have also the liability issue, because board members are liable, but if that's not a board member, maybe liability is not really the same for them. And third, of course, it simply says that it's either the size of your board is not enough, or you don't have enough experience on the board or knowledge in certain areas which are quite essential. So, but again, this is something where we see in many companies. Of course, the other thing which is very common, unfortunately, is the operational board. You see a lot of boards engage heavily in operations. So you can look at the agenda of the board, and then you can see that 70% of the topics are really operational topics. And you start to ask, why are these topics being discussed in the board of directors? These are management topics. Why do they come here? Sometimes it's maybe because most of the board members are executives somewhere else, so they are used to with the executive mentality, or because the management would like to pass everything to the board and they decide, so the liability is on the board, not on the management in making decisions. So this is not really a good practice. And we see that blurry line between the managing and directing. So you see many, as Mohammed said, you have maybe independent board member or non-executive, and he or she acts as a CEO if the CEO is not there. This is not really a good practice. The CEO should have a deputy. So if the CEO has anything, then you have the deputy CEO who is in charge, but not the board in this case. So that blurry line is also creating many issues that we see. And as Mohammed said, a limited time allocated in general and also to strategy as well. So in many cases, because the board is too operational, because we discuss lots of things which we should not be even discussing. So if we have the board like meeting of 2 or 3 hours, most of that is going to operations. And then the final, maybe 5-10 minutes going for strategy, if actually that even happens. So that's another limitation where we have seen. And of course, there is very rare coverage of sustainability. You know, sustainability now is the new trend. It's what investors look at. It's what regulators are focusing on. Central banks, CMAs of the region, and so on. They are really focusing on this. Boards are not still focusing on sustainability the way they should be. And then boards, we see them not engage in dynamic risk discussions, which at this sort of time, what happened is the board will look at a risk register, but that's it. But one of the key elements is simply what have changed, what is increased, what is reduced, what risk emerged, what risk disappeared, and how this affect our strategy. This is a whole discussion for the board of directors. We rarely see this happening. And then technology and digitization as well. You know, this is really the frontier now. And digitization and technology is leading many industries and going into lots of these industries as well. We see the board is not bothered by this too much, not discussing this that much, and maybe only from the IT perspective, which is IT security, which is important. But the idea of how technology can transform our strategy completely and our business, that's not something we see a lot on our boards of directors, unfortunately. So board backs, of course, which are too operational. We see this in many cases, and that's requested by the board or by the management. Limited board education. Now, it's always globally speaking that you ask for continuous education by boards of directors. So they have to be learning all the time. Things are changing, as you know, rapidly. And the management and board secretaries have to bring this new knowledge to the board all the time. They have to be aware of the trends and what's going on. So we see limited time allocated for that. And then finally, we see boards that do not have induction process or do not have a formal induction process. So yes, when we have a new board member, the chairman will meet with him or with her, and we'll have some discussions. But we don't really have a formalized system by which we say a new board member will go through 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So this is a weakness that we have seen in the board. Now, what we are calling for boards in ESG, which we don't really see that much, is again, we need to educate the board that investors are always asking about ESG and sustainability all the time. So the board has to keep this in mind. And they have to take charge of making sure that their companies and banks, they are responsible and they are sustainable, and that they oversee the process and what's happening, and they ask for the right KPIs. That's not really happening that much. Now, how to integrate our sustainability strategy with our strategy in the company, how to make sure that when we make decisions, we are also considering impact on environment and social and governance implications for that decision or that strategy or that strategic initiative. This is, again, remains to be done, and that's by the board of director. And then you talk about disclosure, reporting and oversight. So it's only when you have that system in place, you can think about disclosure after you do this. And again, there is lots of details, but as Mohammed said, we need to give you time for Q&A. Now, many of you are familiar with our index with the S&P Standard & Poor's for listed companies in the MENA region. Now, this index was launched 13 years ago, and it is the first and so far the only index which covering the entire MENA region in the area of sustainability. And what we do is we look at the top 150 listed companies, we subject them to scrutiny and under almost 200 variables of ESG, and then we start to put together the information with S&P, and then S&P, they recalculate the index once every year based on this information coming out to them. And the top 50 companies on ESG are part of the index every year. So if you are a listed company, you are there. If you are not in the 50 companies in the index, this means that your performance is far below what you should be happy for. And this is the information we have on the performance of the companies in that index. You can see that in the last 10 years, the ESG index, which is in the white, has, for the MENA region, has outperformed, the S&P Pan-Arab Composite or index. So this tells you that if you are a company which are in that index, in the ESG sort of, good companies, this will tell you that your share performance will be better than if you are not in that index. So it actually gives you an indication, but also gives investors, and this is very important because investors use that to make decisions to invest in companies or not to invest in companies. So if you are trying to attract investors, foreign investors especially, and institutional investors to invest in the company, you have to pay attention to where do you rank in this index. Just to give you one piece of information of that index, we always say that governance disclosures have been and scores have been improving, but still we are below where we'd like to be. So again, we really, boards of directors have to try to push the management in the area of sustainability and the area of disclosure and the area of good governance reform as well. And this is one of the key rules for the board. Now, finally, just to give you some concluding remarks and then we open the door for discussions. Now, we need to enhance our skill mix of the board of directors so that we can add many elements which are not currently available on board. So it is quite rare that you see a board member who is an expert in sustainability, for example, or who knows sustainability very well in his or her industry. The area of cyber risk, the area of digitalization, for example. Now, we need to make sure that we are adding board members who have these sort of elements, and these elements are better available in younger generations than older generations, because younger generations focus more on the area of cyber, digitization, sustainability. They are actually the ones you can find. You cannot find somebody who's much older who cares or who is expert in these topics that much. Now, boards must have the right size for the company. So I know that you have regulatory sort of limits, but we have to decide, saying, in our case, what kind of knowledge experience we need for our board. And then we start to draft the skill metrics, and then we say, how many people can we have who can actually do all this or can have all this experience and do all the jobs which we have to do, taking into account committees that you have on the board, how many committees you have, and that you have in every committee 3 members at least. So this tells you the size of the board that you should have end of the day. And of course, as you know, there's no one size that fits all. And boards are the ones who own or take the lead in strategy and risk discussions. Now, if you have an agenda which is full with operations, you will not have time for risk and strategy discussions. And this is quite dangerous because the management is busy with operational issues. They are busy with facing the challenges on the ground, facing all the supply chain problems and the employees issues and so on. So the board should take that overview of the company on the area of risk and strategy. That is the board which is pushing in these 2 areas, and nobody else will do that. And also, you need to be educated. So you need the board, as a board, or if you are a company secretary or a board member or even top CEO, you need to prepare some material for the board, whether you get consultants from outside or experts, or you do this yourself, or you have somebody in your team. But the board has to be constantly educating and knowing about the new trends and what's happening, not just about regulatory changes, but also about technology and cyber and trends in the industry and macroeconomic conditions and geopolitical conditions. All these are now affecting companies seriously, as you all know. And of course, in all this, the board secretary plays a very important role. It is really, we can say comfortably that when you have a good board secretary, he or she is really the key factor for an effective board. They can drive that and they can influence lots of processes, including induction process, including education process, including effectiveness, including the right topics on the agenda, taking out the wrong topics from the agenda. And that is the importance of what Mr. Mohammed Jalil was saying, that we need to have the board secretary not reporting to the management, because the management is operational by definition. So you need a secretary reporting to the chairman of the board so that he can guarantee her or his independence from the management in that respect. And then they have to work with the board members as advisors, identify their needs. If they need any support, any trainings, and whatever, they are the ones to do this at the same time. So there is a big rule for company secretaries. And that's why, again, as I'm saying, mandating certification for them is quite essential, so that to make sure that we upgrade the level, and this will affect the quality of the boards in the region in general. Again, I try to give you a very quick sort of flavor of what's happening, so that we open the floor for discussions. There is much more details, but I leave this for the Q&A and maybe future sessions, inshallah. Now, if you have any questions or comments, we are happy to answer them, please.
Thank you very much, Doctor, and Muhammad, for this. Now, corporate governance is like a trend, and all the company, even listed or non-listed companies, like they love to be part of the corporate governance. And as Muhammad mentioned earlier, there's a question that is corporate governance is mandatory or not. What I understand now, previously, where we are implementing the corporate governance over our organization, it was always hearing that best practice. Now there is no more about best practice. Best practice is a good, but now we have a regulation, we have a law, and company law subdelegate the right for SCA and central bank to create the regulation of the corporate governance. My concern or my question is about related party. Related party is like a huge topic, and we need to know more about it. As Muhammad mentioned, that like 5% of the capital of the company, that you should disclose it. But there is a different type. For example, if we say like 10% of the company, but the loan or the facility is like secured 100% by cash margin, will also need to be notified? Because there's sometimes we are dealing with risk. If you are maintaining zero risk, RAROC will not be there, and therefore there is a zero risk. And should we notify the AGM as well?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Razi. Mr. Muhammad, please.
So think about it in this way, Razi. Since this transaction was done with the board member, maybe he had a privilege comparing to the other people, other guy who will be applying this service. Think about it in this way. So by raising the transaction to the board of directors or to the general assembly, the shareholders who own the company will know exactly what's happening, or the board of directors. And through even the corporate governance report, the shareholders will know these details. So if, for example, there was a rumor that this guy had a transaction, he would say that directly. It has been announced to the board of directors, the shareholders have approved it, and everyone knows about it. And there is no privileges that he got it comparing to the others. So think about it in this way.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, just to continue in this, in fact, Mr. Muhammad, you are absolutely correct. I mean, because I know, for example, the CMA in Saudi Arabia, actually, they force the companies to disclose whether there is any reciprocal transaction that happened, and whether that was done on the market norms or there was certain privileges given. And that's for the sake of transparency, and also for the sake of the protection of small shareholders who might be affected by this transaction. Because the whole idea is, if you do a reciprocal transaction to one of the shareholders or board members, and there are benefits given to him, these benefits are in fact at the expense of other shareholders in the company, and this is the whole idea. Mr. Mazen, please go ahead.
Hello, good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Dr. Ashraf, Says Muhammad, thank you so much for this lovely discussion. You can hear me, correct?
Yeah.
Okay, maybe it's a comment or a question. Dr. Ashraf, you mentioned regarding the governance, and Says Muhammad, and the power of governance and the power of the board into this. But the risk usually is that about the flow of information for people, whether it is a person or a group of people, to make the right discussion at the board is to have the right information, is to have the relevant information on time during the board discussion, specifically whether it's strategic, whether there's a risk assessment and then decisions to be made. Who's responsible to ensure that the board of directors are getting, I know it's usually the question is the company secretary, right? But is there something that regulates the company secretary as well? Because he or she is also human, how do we ensure that we're getting to the right information at the right time? That's really the crux of the matter, so that the board can really guide, can really give the stewardship, and making sure that we have all the controls that Dr. Ashraf you mentioned.
Thank you, Mr. Mohammed, would you like to take this, or should I answer as you wish?
You can answer it, and I can maybe add something later on, Doctor.
Okay, so Mr. Mazen, the whole idea is this: the board is liable to make sure that they are functioning properly. This is quite essential. Okay, so if we as board we are not comfortable with our board secretary, for example, or if we think that he or she is not giving us the right information or enough information, or even the management sometimes, because sometimes all what you ask for is information from the CEO or the management. The board is responsible for this, and I have to make sure that I'm getting the right information end of the day. So if you're not satisfied, then you change the company secretary or send him or her to take some courses, for example. That's really one thing. The second thing, which is we always advise boards of this: don't depend only on information coming to you from your company and the board secretary. You have to seek your own information somewhere else. So don't depend only on the report coming from the CEO. Read yourself about the industry here and globally, what's happening, what are the lessons learned, what are the problems, the failures, and then you learn from that as well. So don't just have one source. Mr. Mohammed, you'd like to add anything?
Maybe also, since I mentioned previously regarding that independency of the board secretary, so this one he'll be free to raise any topic he wants. Besides that, maybe the board should think about the whistleblowing also. Maybe this thing may support the board if any misleading information has been raised by one of the employee or misdoing from one of the employees. So these things maybe the board should reconsider about it. Plus, there's an audit committee and remuneration committee. These two committees are meeting with the other executive employees in the company, such as the CFO or the finance director and the remuneration with the HR. They can get more information rather than getting only from, as Dr. Ashraf mentioned, from the CEO and the board secretary. So they have different resources for the information, and they can re-evaluate the board secretary later on at the end of the year.
I think there is another question, but it's too long, Mohammed. If you'd like to read it on the panel, it's actually Article 40, 2020 regulations, which is a person who has the right to attend the General Assembly may delegate someone from other than the board of directors or the staff. One of the key things, remember, Mr. Patil, is simply that the board, the AGM, they assess the board of directors and they decide whether they are happy with the performance or not happy with the performance. So if you are a shareholder, you cannot delegate the board members to do that, because they assess themselves and they decide on the package for themselves and so on. And even sometimes they might decide to take the board to the court, for example, or not release them from liability on certain actions. So that's why you cannot delegate to somebody from the management or from the board of directors, because they are under scrutiny in the AGM. They are under control and under supervision by the AGM. So that's why you can delegate another shareholder if you like, but not a board member. I'm not sure, Mohammed, do you have any details on this article? Or
I totally agree with you, Doctor. Regarding the delegation, should not be a board member or an employee within the company.
Excuse me.
Yeah,
yes.
Go ahead.
Yes, the question came from me. Actually, my question at the first place was, what if the board member himself, he is a shareholder and he would like to vote during the AGM, exception for some items which will make conflict, like discharge the board members from its liability. Is the board member who is attending the AGM and he is at the same time a shareholder, can he still vote for some of the items, or he can give a proxy for someone to vote on behalf of him? Thank you.
This one, Manar will be answering your question after the session, since we need to go into details much more.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Mr. Muhammad, please go ahead. Muhammad Wah.
السلام عليكم دكتور. السلام عليكم مستر محمد جنيد، كيف حالكم؟
الحمد لله.
Just to comment on Miss Manar request, and this is طبعا after SCA already gave us the advice before. In the AGM, we request formally that the board members, like if we look to the topic of the remuneration of the board, neither the board member nor the proxy of the board member can vote on that. And we ask for this in the AGM. So the board secretary in the AGM need to highlight that neither the board member nor the proxy are allowed, and ask them not to vote on these items. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Okay, any other questions or comments here? Now, Muhammad, I just have one question for you as per the the ISCA sort of future thinking about sustainability. You know, of course, the UAE is hosting COP28 this year, inshallah, and there is a pressure on the area of sustainability. Does ISCA have any plans on trying to mandate more sustainability on companies, ask for more things by companies?
Yes, so currently we're working on changes and a lot of regulation. Plus, we're having new regulations such as since we're requesting listed companies to disclose the sustainability report, but at the same time they're following the financial market requirements. They're following currently the GRI, and in the near future, we're waiting for the final confirmation or final regulation issued by the IFRS regarding the ISSP. So maybe we'll be following the ISSP regulation. This announcement has been done through a committee. I'm a member of the committee, is the Sustainable Finance Working Group, which is the other regulation are members also, and I'm leading one of the subcommittees also. So we're waiting only for the final regulation, which should be issued in the near future regarding the ISSP reporting. Plus, there is a lot of other regulation issued by ISCA, such as the green bond, green sukuk, and green funds. It has been issued for public consultation, and we got the feedback. This one also will be supporting COP28. Plus, there is another initiatives it has been we're working on. It has been haven't been disclosed, but it will be also supporting the COP28, and we're working with the other ministries such as the Ministry of Climate Change, the MUKAI. So just we're waiting the official announcement from their side since they're the owner of the project.
I see.
So yeah, it will be really very something that will be supporting also the financial sector in this regards.
Okay. Actually, one of the elements which I wanted to bring to the participants' attention is, actually, as Hawkama, we are members of the OECD Corporate Governance Committee, which is now working on a new code of corporate governance. The latest OECD guidelines that came out was the OECD G20 corporate governance provisions, which came out in 2015. Now there is a new chapter, or actually a new version, which is being revised. We finished already the work. Now it's in the final revision phase and final fine-tuning, and expected to come out maybe third quarter of this year. And in that one, there is a whole chapter on sustainability. So you will see that in every chapter we talk about, say, the board of directors, for example, the committees of the board, and the responsibilities and so on. You talk about sustainability, but then you have a whole chapter focusing just on sustainability issues. So there will be a huge push once this comes out, because as you know, most of our codes in the region are based on the OECD principles. So once there is a change, and I know that actually there was even a commission here a couple of weeks back from the OECD, and I attended with them meeting with the Ministry of Economy, where the minister listened to the new changes proposed, and which might again come to our company. So I think the key advice I want to give is be prepared for more sustainability. So you might want to be ahead of the curve and try to act more in this area rather than wait until something comes out from the regulators. Any questions, any comments? I know that our time is up, but just if you have any final comments or questions. Okay. Mr. Muhammad, you'd like to say anything at the end before we finish?
It was really my pleasure to be here with you. And I hope that I have give you some information and I benefited you. And I hope to see you, inshallah, in the near future, inshallah, either in present or through virtual meetings.
Inshallah. Thank you so much, Mr. Muhammad, and
Thank you very much.
thank SCA for this partnership. I'd like to thank everyone.